Okay, and Nataraja, I'll speak with you for a moment.
Oh, hello.
Hello.
Hello, hello, Mooji.
Hey, good.
I have a great fear of to be rejected.
To be?
Rejected, to be forsaken, to be rejected.
Well, rejected.
Yeah,
rejected.
rejected. Yeah. And I have a very strong longing in my heart to go this way, to meet truth.
Yes.
And there's also a pain in this, not to feel the. Sometimes I feel the connection. Some I'm there, but then this comes that, and it's due to thing in the early childhood. It doesn't have to go there, but and it comes in that no, you will not be, you will not be included. And this was the same thing. I was here also. The gentleman before me, he was at the same time in the first days, and I was having my hand up, and he was chosen.
Yeah, it's coming up again, isn't it? It's coming up again. The
Yes.
sense of someone else makes it, and I'm left behind.
Yes,
So
yeah, exactly.
yeah, and so we will look at that because surely it's presenting itself as an impediment to going beyond it, because it is holding the shape of a personal self.
Yes.
And that has with all the juice that comes with that. And if you are standing in identity with that, it's going to be a kind of shape that will create some like a screen of separation between what it is that I'm pointing to, which is not in front of you, but it is even before you, before the idea you have of yourself, the true place. So there's not like, it's not like we have to solve an eclipse. It's not like you're one, you're here, and the truth is there, and something is in between to block you from the truth. That would not be a true diagram. The truth is not an objective goal, although it might appear like this in the mind, because of the way the traditional, conventional use of mind. We are going somewhere, and even people who have been on the path do have a misconception like that I'm getting closer, but that is because we are still identified ourselves as an object. The object-subject of myself feels to be getting closer, and then oops, I've missed again, and so this identity is going to be the target of our looking for a moment, the one that is inclined to feel left out or rejected or abandoned or overlooked. You see, and so some distance has to come, which there is, but when we are more strongly in the shape of a personhood, that's when it is most alive, and it will not be in service to the more profound recognition of what is there before this state come. So again, just express to me what is the highest intention, the highest aspiration within you right now. That is not based on history. It's alive in you.
To come home in the bigger heart, to
be yourself in the truest sense.
Yes, to be myself in the truest sense. And
may I ask?
Yes.
May I ask you at the moment what seems to be in the way of that realization? Because no doubt you have been listening. You have been following. You have a sense of what I'm pointing to, at, and from. What obstructs or makes that until now unrealizable in your view?
The fear of not being accepted.
Yes. Thank you. And what is it about you which is unacceptable, possibly?
That I don't know. I've been looking to see why this happened to me.
Yes.
To see a reason.
To see why this happened to you. So it's an happening, a happening. The fear of being rejected happening to me, to me.
Yes.
Me being what? Slow down.
It's the sense of personality, the person that I sense that I am.
Yes.
Yes. That this is happening to me, and what comes up to me now is what you said about this master. I heard it several times. I suffer. I suffer my experience.
Yes. When the example I was giving was when someone had mentioned in satsang, I'm hearing everything fairly clearly. In my mind, I understand. But if I am to be honest, this young man was saying, in my own case, in my own honest expression, I'm always experiencing suffering. He put it like that. And the master responded and said, that is not correct. No. You are not experiencing suffering. You're suffering, you're experiencing. And that hit you. That hit you there.
Yes.
Because you say, well, that's probably what's happening here. I'm suffering my experiencing. I'm suffering my thought. I'm suffering an idea I have of myself.
Yes.
Almost like an idea I have of who I am is suffering from its own projections. I can try saying that in another way.
Yes, but I sense that and it's like I'm so identified with this.
Let's put it another way, that an identification, some force within you identifies with a personal sense of self, which and part of that personal self feels very vulnerable to being criticized or the sense of rejection.
Yes.
And all of that energetically, the emotion of that, the image of that is visible to a deeper space. Can you follow me now, word by word?
Yeah.
Yes. So when that comes up, there's an energetic response. It's like the body feels tense. The body may feel tense, and some strong emotions may start to appear inside the space of your being. But these are perceivable, no? They're being perceived to the extent that when I say whatever you perceive or conceive cannot be what you are, because there's kind of come a moment when they go, as they all do and must. And if you were that, when they go, you would also be gone. But something is here to witness, wow, that thought is gone. You see? So you cannot be that which you are perceiving, whether visually or experientially, emotionally. There are states that happen within you, and they come and go. But on account of memory plays a part in holding a bit of that shape somehow in the psyche, and then some identity is held onto. So it's as though you get a mind attack or a mind person attack. It comes up, and it's activated. Something is said, or an action of that, like someone may say, "No, I don't need to talk to you," and that immediately gets acted upon by this sense of a vulnerable self. And it's come, and then it's as though your screen is filled with this cloud of agitatedness or something. But I'm only putting now that there's something that is aware of this, a space of awareness within you, okay, in which those scenes happen and they pass. But what happens is that, they do pass, meaning that they're no more. They may leave some impression inside the psyche, inside the function of memory, that say, okay, there it goes again, and something tightens up to say, okay, I'm never going to let that happen to me again or something. So that seeing, which I'm speaking about, again now, you see, it starts to hold the charge of another personal, a memory of something. So it's that one again is as reformed into a kind of self. The deeper seeing is not touched by that. I want to see if we can see that. There's a space inside of just pure awareness, which is impersonal. It has no past or lineage, nor does it have any projection towards future states. It is a sort of stateless state, a place where even the activity or the functioning of perceiving is subtly perceived in it, but it is not doing anything. Are you in recognition of this?
Yes, I can sense that now in my heart.
Yes, yes.
That I can see this.
Yes.
And
is there any personal characteristics or quality about this space? Not the images that are coming, but just in this pure seeing.
No.
No. Thank you. That's good. That's good. So it itself does not suffer.
No.
But very near it feels is a sense of a self that needs to be protected, which is itself a shape or an idea arising in it. Feeling very near, very, very near to some sort of surface. But it's still on the screen of perceivables.
I can sense that I see this pain, and it's a distance from the seer.
Okay. When you say I can see this pain, is that a report from the seeing, from the seer? Is the seer an entity seeing? Slow down. No. Oh, so when you say seer, it's not, I say this because when we add ER onto something, it takes a shape. Like there's a seeing in the seeing.
Yes.
Yeah. Whatever is happening is not happening to an entity. Would it be like that? But only to an idea, to the idea formed of oneself. These impressions, these emotions, these fears are happening in that. So what I'm saying here is that the sense of a personal identity and its world, projected or experienced, I put them together as two sides of one coin, visible to a deeper seeing within you, which is not personal. The seeing itself, because those states may come and they may be active for a moment or two, and then they also pass by the law of life. The law of functional consciousness is that they pass. Everything is a play of duration. They pass. Moods, feelings, memories, attachments, all of these sensations, they come and go and are witnessed to come and go. So I'm only now interested in the place where they are witnessed. Is there anything personal there in the pure witnessing? Is it particularly interested in what is being witnessed? Is it attached to anything that's being witnessed?
No. It's just witness.
It's just witnessed. Okay, that's a good step. That's a good step. It's not now. In a way, this understanding and this seeing may appear to be happening, and even to the sense of person may feel, okay, I'm liking that, or this is making sense to me. But right now what I'm going to do, I'm still, even if it seems to make sense to any sense of a person, I'm going to include that making sense of as also images that are possible also.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And that in the deep seeing is not benefiting from anything at all. Where the benefit would happen is that the reflex or the tendency to identify as an objective self with a history and tendencies, the grip it seems to have when it is seen as it's only perceived, it's not true. It only appears to be true when the believer in it is not seen to be also a cloud passing also, or possible. I'm sorry, it's a bit too many words there perhaps, but are you able to see where I'm saying?
Yes, yes.
So I'm including even the most subtle sensations, which we are inclined to hold these impressions as a part of who we are, as a tangible, fixed self, is also just momentary in their lifespan. They come and they go. An ability within us, an attribute, or is able to hold them in what you may call memory for a while. But this memory also is not stable. It also subsides in its power also. And it's also something is able to see. If I can just say for a moment, suppose you went to the doctor about your eye, some eye seeing defect, and he says, well, how can I help you? And you say, well, actually, my visibility in my eyes have got worse. He says, what, in both eyes equally? You say, no. In the left eye, I would sort of rate it like it's like 85% functioning good. But in the right eye, I would say 40 something percent. No? What is seeing? Seeing, the capacity to see. What is able to see? The ability or the inability to see clearly. Or you see, there's something earlier. Even if some thought appears inside and something, there's an awareness. If we don't identify or log into that thought process with a strong sense of personal identity, you see that everything passes like clouds drifting in the undrifting sky. The cloud from things coming and going. Now some clouds, now I'm presenting clouds as some sensations seem to come more for a particular identity and like that. But all of them together, I'm not making categories now, I'm saying the whole lot. The sensation, the memory, the identity, the present play, the past play, all of them I'm putting in the basket of seeing. Okay? That which is present, that which is past, that which is likely to come again, is all activities appearing in front of a constant seeing ability in you. You see? You with this?
Yes.
Okay. In the place of the constant perceiving, is there anything personal in it? Is it personal?
No.
Is that important to you?
To be personal?
No, that to the recognition that it itself is not personal. And that even the most virile feelings and emotions and personal identity are observable phenomenon to it. When you say self, if I say, when you have the feeling of self, where does that self go to an object or to sort of like a space of?
More inwards. I feel it's a sense.
A sense, okay.
Yes.
So may I say that even that internal sense of a self, that subtle internal sense of a self, is itself also perceivable as sensations that appear in consciousness, and they also pass, and are witnessed to pass. In the place where they are witnessed to be passable or passing, is that itself passing?
No.
If I ask you just to just be one with that, or pay attention to that, without creating a shape about it, are you here?
What did you say?
If I say to simply to be one in the place where of just the seeing, or to the extent that even the act of perceiving, the functioning of perceiving, is itself registering in that. Okay? That's very subtle now. We're very subtle.
Yes.
And as subtle as any other thing that is perceivable might appear in it, they all are subject to change in time and space. They go. But this place where even the seeing of seeing is this changing?
No. No.
That which is able to verify this, is that not you? What is there
Yes.
What is there to be able to verify what is constant? Can something which is variable verify what is constant?
No.
No. Okay. So the fact that something is saying, here is unchanging. If I were to say something ludicrous like 1,000 years ago, if we can conceive of such a thing, will this have been 1,000 years younger?
No.
No. Okay. So you are demonstrating a capacity to verify something that cannot be verified in objective terms. It's just a sense of it is.
Yes. It is.
Yes. Did anybody give it to you?
No.
No.
It's just there.
Yes. When you say I, does I denote, is it relating to this? Or is the I personal? When the feeling I, the sense I in you now, is it an object I, the person called Nataraj?
No.
Ah.
Oh.
What is it?
It's
yeah.
It's
May I ask you what without thinking, what is your, how are you here now? What is your state? How are you? How is this? For me, it's the same question. How are you and how is this? What is this like?
It's peace.
Yes.
It's no words. It's
yes.
I feel it's difficult to put words in it, because when I put words in it, it's
you're correct. The words can only begin to describe what I would call the perfume arising in it.
Yeah.
You started with peace. And what else is there? What are you perceiving?
It's a silence.
Silence, yes.
And it's no time.
Timeless, yes.
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 And it's like a like home.
Home.
Yeah.
No furnishings, no furnishing.
No.
No. Home.
No.
Yes. Did you imagine any of this? Or are you directly perceiving? Are you creating?
No.
No. Okay. What you are aware of right now, that which causes you to perceive these things, such as peace and space, that which enables the sharing of now there's peace and there's space and feels like home, can that in itself be described? I think you answered it. You say there are no words here.
No, there's no words.
But the nearest words are going to speak about peace and spaciousness.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. You say home. But it's not a place, yes. Not a... No. Yeah. Means it's yourself.
Yes.
And the vulnerable one?
I forgot about him.
Yes.
He's not here.
Yeah. But
and it's there is some kind of shattering slightly going on in the mind.
Yes, yeah.
But it's no importance.
Let us say in this that is it a fluctuating state, this space that we are speaking from, looking? No. Okay. So is it afraid if the mind comes back and the sense of the person with this vulnerability, if will it prefer that it doesn't show up?
No, it will show up.
Yeah, good. Okay. Will this be compromised in any way?
No. It's I feel when I'm here.
Yes.
When I'm when the mind is
you see, you're struggling to speak is the eloquence of your being, actually. You are not able to put it into words by a habit and tendency to try, but it's collapsing in front of you. It won't hold against this which is wordless, in this wordless.
No, the thing that could happen is that because the mind has been imitating.
Yes.
My mind.
Yes.
Been imitating.
Yes.
And it can go in and then it knows, like you said with the gentleman before, no, I know, and no, and then it starts to be a mind thing.
Yes.
And
yes.
And I
but that is perceivable or not?
Yes.
Yes.
And I can just if I don't try to get rid of something, if I don't like the word I when this is seen in the light of the awareness.
Yeah.
It's like it deludes.
Yeah.
Do you say that?
Yes.
It goes. Yes. It's and not to have. I want this to change. I want this. I want to get rid of it. Bam. Then Just let it come.
I would say welcome it, but not emotionally. When I say welcome it, don't be over friendly with it. Meaning that allow the space of it to move, allow it to move.
Yes.
Okay, but only you're able to do that when you're clear. You're clear in your own being that you are this. You are the stillness, not as an idea, but that is your actual being. You're watching from the stillness. That's not a teaching anymore. That has to be your verifiable experience. Then it can come now, and it will come, and sometimes it will feel more potently aggressive, no?
Mm-hmm.
But then you will know the mechanism of how that happens. It's as though when the mind energy come, it's as though it's auditioning for your attention to get personal. If you don't log in with your personal ID, then there's more distance. Why is the mind feel so terrible? Because in a way, it appears to fill your space. It becomes claustrophobic because you have become a person. You have taken on the identity of the person, which is a habit that happened. But this does not pertain to the awareness I'm speaking about. Is it affected there?
No.
So therefore, how can the state of suffering you're experiencing happen?
With the identification with the person.
Yes. Now, identification may happen, but that also is still visible inside the non-happening awareness, isn't it? And this is why I say abide in that. Because a tendency can be like, aha, eureka, oh yes, I got it now, now I know. But I say abide in it mean to keep, life will keep presenting situations, some smaller ones, some medium, some big size and so on, that you may constantly keep checking in that, from the place of awareness, they don't have that impact. Only when you go into personal identity, when personal identity is formed and believed in, then basically it's like the show begins or continues. So I'm only pointing you to the power when Sri Maharaj said to him, you're not experiencing suffering, you're suffering you're experiencing. He gave the power back to him, as I am to you, to say that when these things come, you may see that a reflex, almost like you're too late, you're in shape already, or something goes in shape. But that, however fast that may happen, it cannot be missed in the pure awareness, which has no speed at all. And in the practice of checking in and looking at anything that comes in front, you start to see that it's only a movement inside the unmoving awareness itself. If we take the metaphor of the sky, the clouds are coming, anything can show up. And some people, I say, go and take a look at the sky. And they'll come and have a report about the clouds and how blue the sky is, or how bright the sun is, or something. But another one may come and just say, actually, it's just infinite and unchanging. You see? So the tendency to go to the dynamic and to take your reading of yourself from the dynamic, it will change without trying to suffocate the dynamic or to control it. Just from being self-aware as awareness and not as person. And gradually the grip of personhood, the sort of poisonous sense of in this that comes with this hypnosis of personhood, that will gradually lift by itself. There's no need to wait though, because as awareness you don't need to wait for anything at all.
I hold the same thing as you're telling us to do, that existence is testing us with things that happens.
Yes, I'd rather say, we can use the word testing, or giving you the opportunity to verify your true place.
Yes, it's for my own good.
For your own good.
Yes.
For your own good. This is a power thinking, power seeing, you see? Because somebody say, oh, you know, the mind, you know, I'm trying to get rid of my mind. You turn it into an enemy and you suffer him. But if you see it is providing an opportunity to verify, clarify, to discern, and to rest in your completeness, that's what is a better use of the functioning of consciousness. And yet it's not cursing the manifest, because the manifesting is not an enemy to the real, you see. So rather than suffer it, in a sense, by remaining as you are, you impart a kind of blessing to it.
Maybe not in the moment, but later.
Okay. When?
When I see this is for my own good.
Yes.
And then
yes. Sorry, you being what again? You being what again? Just to remind me of who you are. So for your own good. You being what again?
Awareness.
Ah. Okay.
But it's
let it go. Let it go.
Yeah, but it's the ego mind it opens up, because I like what you did with your hands. You hold your hands like this, and it's a matter of open up and letting go.
Yes.
And it's so easy that to go into, in a subtle way, to go into identification.
Yes.
And then it's like a boom, a slap on the head, a sin stick on the head, and then you...
For a while, we'll need the Zen stick on the head until you don't need it.
Yes.
And you'll read the Zen stick in a kind of way. You say it's for my own good.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So so for the moment, you say, well, I may not be able to impart blessing to anything at the moment, for the moment, until I'm so sufficiently stabilized in my understanding. So it's not fluctuate. It's not now and again, because in the place of the awareness, it's constant. It's even use the word constant for me feels a bit limitation, because it's never not constant, or it's beyond that.
Yes.
Yeah.
But what I meant was that I have to be, I'm back there again, because to be aware of the manifested word that I don't get. So sometimes I can, when it happens something outside, I can laugh, because I can just see that it's just.
Watch this thing about laughing even.
Okay.
I'm saying it for a reason, because sometimes people say, I can say, ha, I can just laugh at it. No, be careful, because Mr. Arrogance is very close to all of display.
Yes.
No, just your seeing, and somehow in the neutrality of your own seeing, there's a quiet, a silence, unkept. It's simply just somehow you're here. It's totally complete in its own way. The mind, by habit, is used to going for the adventure and then the next thing, and it's a habit. But increasingly, you catch it before it takes the shape of a you. You know, you catch it more and more, and as such, it's very important that you're faithful to the exercise, that you maintain your discipline to keep looking, rather than to just, okay, there we go again, and oh no, what I'm going to do, and so on. You'll catch that more and more. If you choose.
I do.
Then
I have chosen.
Then you will.
But I need your guidance and your help.
Yes, you have it. This seeing here at the moment, it's really beautiful, you know, because from being the hot head to almost no head, or even a head, but cool head, whatever, something has taken, you're winning your power back, if I can use this way of looking. And for a while we may have to, we may need to keep exercising that discernment. Sometimes you might feel you're too late. Oh, you're back. And it said, no, there's no time in this. It's okay. Just take a look and steady your seeing again, and everything comes back into a natural harmony. It's totally subjective projections and so on. And yes, I am fully with you on it.
Thank you.
I feel there's something else you want to say, something more you want to, just before we...
There's a release happening in the heart. It's
yes,
in my emotional heart.
Yes,
but it's not, the big heart is not affected, but in my and it's like a
yes.
And there's this thing has been like there's a longing for love, and this thing, keeping things together, is closing the love.
Yes.
So it feels like the heart is opening up more.
Yes. Yes. Leave that for a moment. Just let that happen. Okay. That's happening automatically in your place of awareness itself.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Does it need love?
Oh, sorry. No. 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 It's no.
Yeah. Is that is that a disappointing discovery, or?
No.
No.
I can see that there have been some misunderstandings.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Nothing to hold on to. Nothing sticks. Nothing sticks. Yeah. Yeah. How relevant is the past from the place of awareness?
No relevance.
Okay.
It's
and future?
No.
Very good. Thank you, Nataraj. Thank you for giving this kind of time and focus to this looking. Very good. Thank you. Yeah. Very good.
Thank you.
Thanks to you. Thank you. Very good. Wonderful. Thank you.